The chamber was a cathedral of alien power. Black walls laced with veins of glowing crystal, a throne of living stone pulsing with faint heartbeats, and a ceiling that stretched so high the light seemed swallowed before it could return. The vile Dominion did not build ships. They grew them. And inside the belly of this monstrous flagship, Captain Elias stood in chains. The queen descended from her throne with the grace of a predator. She was unlike anything born of Earth, twice his height, her body armored in plates of violet crystal that shifted as if alive. Her hands ended in hooked talons, and her eyes gleamed with molten gold. When she moved, the air itself seemed to bow. Around Elias, the other survivors of his unit knelt in shackles. Some were injured, their uniforms torn and bloodied. Through the vast window behind the queen, they could see the wreckage of humanity's last stand, broken hulls of human warships tumbling slowly across the void, still glowing from plasma fire. Their fleet had been annihilated. The queen circled Elias, her voice carrying a cruel amusement. "Your kind fascinates me. So thin, so fragile. I hear your bones crack when we strike you." She leaned close enough for him to see his own reflection in her faceted eyes. Then she laughed, a sound like breaking glass mixed with thunder. The sound rolled across the chamber, joined by the hissing laughter of her guards. Elias stood silent. His lip bled, one eye swollen shut, his wrists bound by energy coils. But his silence only amused her further. "Speak," she mocked. "Tell me, how did a species with glass skeletons think it could challenge the veil? Did you believe courage could protect you? That your little machines could outmatch us?" She extended her claws toward his chest as if tempted to pierce him where he stood. The guards murmured, watching with hungry eyes. The queen loved to humiliate her prey before she broke them, and this human captain was no exception. With a snap of her fingers, the chamber doors split open. Two beast handlers dragged in a creature caged by chains of living metal. The animal snarled, four eyes burning like hot coals, its body sleek with armored muscle. It was a predator from her homeworld, bred to hunt and slaughter. Stripes of dark crimson patterned its hide, and its teeth gleamed like rows of knives. The queen gestured casually. "You see this creature? Even a cub of the Orath tiger outweighs you threefold. It is born to kill. And yet, to us, it is nothing more than sport." The handlers loosened its bonds, letting the beast snarl and lunge forward until the chains stopped it inches from Elias. Its hot breath blasted against his face, reeking of blood. His men recoiled, some whispering prayers, others staring with wide-eyed terror. The queen smiled down at him. "Go on, fragile man. Show us your courage now." Elias did not answer. His ribs throbbed where he'd been beaten, and his muscles burned from hours in restraints. Yet as he stared at the beast straining against its chains, something inside him hardened. He thought of Earth, of the rivers he had fished in as a boy, of the laughter of his crew before the battle, of the graves of those who had already fallen in this war. He thought of humanity, cornered but unbroken. The queen stepped back, expecting him to cower. Her guards leaned forward eagerly, anticipating the spectacle of another human crushed beneath their ruler's cruelty. But Elias lowered his stance. Slowly, deliberately, he bent his knees and reached for the beast. The alien soldiers exchanged confused murmurs. No prisoner had ever dared touch one of the queen's pets. His fingers slid under its chest. The beast thrashed, snarling, its claws gouging the steel floor. Blood slicked his palms, but he gritted his teeth and pushed harder. His arms screamed. His cracked ribs flared with white-hot agony. The air filled with gasps, human and alien alike, as Elias heaved with everything he had. Inch by inch, impossibly, the creature began to rise. The queen's laughter died in her throat. Chains rattled as Elias staggered upright, the tiger-like predator held high above his head. His body trembled violently, veins standing out against his skin, but he did not falter. For one eternal moment, every eye in the chamber locked on him. This broken man lifting the impossible. Elias's voice rang out, raw and hoarse, yet clear enough to cut through the silence. "Fragile. You don't know what fragile means," and with a defiant roar, he hurled the beast down at the queen's feet. The chamber erupted into chaos. His crew shouted in stunned triumph. The alien guards stumbled back, whispering in disbelief. The Queen stood frozen, her golden eyes wide with something she had never felt in centuries: doubt. And in that instant, Elias knew the war was not yet lost. The chamber did not breathe for several seconds after Elias dropped the beast. The predator hit the floor with a thud, stunned but alive, snarling as it scrambled back on its claws. Its handlers rushed forward to drag it away, but no one was looking at the creature anymore. Every gaze, human and alien alike, was fixed on the man who had done what none of them believed possible. Elias stood shaking, chest heaving, every muscle in his body burning like fire. Sweat poured down his face, mingling with blood, but his eyes were steady. The silence cracked first from the human side. One of his men, battered and kneeling in chains, let out a hoarse shout, "That's our captain!" Others joined in, voices raw, their chains clattering as they struggled to rise. The sound of their defiance echoed off the crystal walls, filling the throne chamber with something alien to the Dominion. Hope. The Queen's guards shifted uneasily. Their queen was worshipped as invincible, the perfect predator among lesser species. Yet here was a human, weak by their standards, lifting one of their most feared beasts and hurling it like nothing more than a challenge. The queen herself descended the steps of her throne, talons clicking against the living stone. Her molten eyes burned into Elias, studying him as if he were a puzzle that shouldn't exist. She tilted her head slightly, her voice low but sharp. "You should not be capable of that." Elias straightened as much as his battered frame allowed. "Maybe not. But humans don't measure themselves the way you do. You look at bones and muscle. We measure by will." His words carried, simple and hard as iron. The soldiers around the chamber felt them like sparks landing on dry tinder. The Queen's jaw tightened. She had planned to humiliate, to break, to prove her superiority. Instead, the spectacle had turned against her. She could not allow doubt to fester among her warriors. She raised her clawed hand, ready to strike him down, to end this defiance with one killing blow. But Elias's men roared louder, shouting his name, their voices overlapping until it sounded like thunder in the alien hall. "Elias! Elias! Elias!" The sound was electric. Hidden in the chains of their uniforms, micro-transmitters flickered to life. Some had been smuggled in during capture, unknown to their captors. The images of the human captain standing against the Queen, lifting the impossible, were already spreading, through broken channels, across occupied worlds, through shattered fleets. Tiny pulses of data carried a story, and the story grew wings. On mining colonies where enslaved humans labored under Dominion whips, whispers began, "They called us fragile. But one of us lifted a Dominion beast." On remote outposts where resistance fighters hid, the footage flared across stolen consoles. He stood against their queen. He defied her to her face. On starships drifting wounded in dark space, survivors straightened their backs, fists clenched, hearts pounding with new fury. The Queen, realizing what was happening, snarled. She struck Elias across the face with her claws, sending him crashing to the floor in a spray of blood. But even as pain tore through him, he pushed himself back up on one knee, his mouth filled with iron, yet he grinned through broken teeth. "You can kill me," he rasped, "but you'll never kill what I just started." The Queen froze. She could feel it in the air, the shift. Fear no longer pressed down on the humans. It pressed down on her. For the first time in centuries, her throne room did not echo with unquestioned obedience. Her guards looked at each other, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. The Dominion ruled through intimidation, through the certainty of their dominance. Doubt was poison, and Elias had planted it deep. The Queen gave a sharp gesture. "Take them to the pits. Break their spirits before dawn." The soldiers moved, but sluggishly, as if the command carried less weight than before. Elias and his crew were dragged away, bloodied yet grinning, because they knew what she did not. The image had already escaped. In the bowels of the ship, chained once again in a cell, Elias lay against the wall, pain crashing through every nerve. One of his men whispered through cracked lips, "Captain, you lifted it. I saw it. Everyone saw it. Elias forced a breathless laugh. Good, then they'll remember. And if they remember, they'll fight. Far above, in the void of space, the ember had caught flame. Across the shattered remnants of humanity's fleet, across colonies thought lost, across the hidden corners of resistance, a single message spread. Humans are not fragile. Not anymore. And from that moment, the war shifted. The story of Elias spread faster than any fleet could travel. By the time the Queen's flagship left orbit, half the galaxy's backwaters whispered his name. He had lifted a beast of the Dominion. He had stared their queen in the face and defied her. And in a galaxy where fear of the Vial had chained billions, even a rumor of resistance was fire in dry fields. On Earth's outer colonies, long considered doomed, militias rose from the ashes. Starship engineers rebuilt ruined hulls from scrapyards. Civilians carved weapons out of mining equipment. Every person became a soldier. Humanity was scattered and broken, but not beaten. Elias, freed from the flagship by a daring rescue raid, returned to the front with scars carved across his face and fire in his eyes. He carried the weight of his people's hope now. He could not afford to stumble. Their enemy was immense. The Dominion did not fight with machines but with living warships, creatures grown in vats of starlight and bone. Their hulls rippled with muscle, their cannons pulsed with organic energy, and their crews fused directly into their vessels. When they struck, entire planets burned. Against that, humanity's fleet was laughable. Steel ships patched with scavenged parts, reactors always one spark away from failure, weapons designed for smaller wars. But humans had something the Dominion never considered: adaptability. Elias organized raids that broke every rule of warfare. His small fleets hid in the debris of destroyed planets, masking their energy signatures, waiting for Dominion patrols to drift too close. Then they would strike, short, brutal ambushes where torpedoes gutted living ships before their captains realized they were prey. Each victory was costly, but each sent a message. Humans were not simply running anymore. They were hunting. On Vega 9, a Dominion resource hub, Elias launched his boldest strike yet. Instead of targeting the war beasts, he hit the breeders. His fleet dropped from warp with shields already overloaded, ramming enemy lines head-on. Boarding pods slammed into the swollen, pulsing chambers where new warships gestated. Human marines fought in air that smelled of blood and ozone, cutting down alien caretakers, setting charges in the quivering flesh of half-formed ships. When the explosives tore through, Vega 9 lit the void with fire. Entire broods of warships were destroyed before they ever drew their first breath. The Queen saw the flames from her palace world. Her fury shook the Dominion's command ranks. To her, Elias was no longer an insect to mock. He was a thorn that drew blood. She sent hunting fleets after him, commanded by her most ruthless warlords. But Elias refused to fight them on their terms. He led them into asteroid fields where Dominion ships' massive bodies could not maneuver. He tricked them into chasing decoys loaded with nuclear warheads. He hacked their organic communications, feeding false orders that made their own fleets collide. Every victory came at a price. Human ships burned with every raid. Men and women were lost by the thousands. Yet each time, survivors returned sharper, harder, more determined. They learned their enemies' weaknesses, how the living hulls recoiled from radiation, how Dominion beasts faltered when their nerve clusters were struck, how the Queen's soldiers froze when doubt crept into their ranks. The galaxy began to notice. Other enslaved species, long cowed into silence, watched the humans closely. They had endured centuries of Veil dominance, believing resistance was impossible. But when they heard that a fragile-boned species had struck Dominion shipyards, had destroyed broods before they hatched, something stirred. Small uprisings ignited. Slave miners sabotaged Dominion facilities. Refugees smuggled supplies to human fleets. The fire Elias had sparked was no longer confined to his people. It was spreading across worlds. Still, the cost weighed on him. After Vega 9, he stood on the bridge of his battered flagship, the Resolute, staring out at wreckage drifting past. His crew was cheering their success, but his mind replayed the faces of the dead. "They'll come harder now," murmured his second officer. Elias nodded grimly. "Good, let them." We'll make them bleed for every star." In the throne world, the queen stood before her council, her claws slicing grooves into her crystal table. "This human will be broken. I will tear the hope from their bones myself," her voice carried like a vow of vengeance. But even as she spoke, the fires Elias had lit spread wider, and the Dominion, once unshakable, felt the first cracks in its endless rule. The war was no longer survival. It was transformation. Humanity had ceased being prey. They were becoming predators. War turned time into a blur. Days bled into nights of battle, repair, and flight. Humanity fought like wolves cornered in the dark, snapping, bleeding, refusing to go down. Victories came, but so did losses, and with each one the weight on Elias's shoulders grew heavier. The Dominion adapted. They unleashed newer horrors. Colossal beasts bred for war, their hides bristling with living cannons. Assassins that moved like shadows through corridors. Storms of plasma hurled from orbit that turned entire cities to ash. Humanity had no reserves to match such power. Every battle was a gamble. Elias led one of the most dangerous gambits on a frozen moon circling a dead star. Intelligence suggested the Dominion was growing nerve cores there, pulsating organs that powered their living ships. Destroying them could cripple an entire fleet. Failure meant extinction. The Resolute crept into orbit through magnetic storms that battered its shields. Elias, Harper, his second-in-command, and a squad of veterans descended in drop shuttles. The surface was an endless wasteland of jagged ice ridges, lit only by the pale glow of the dead star. They moved swiftly through blizzards, guided by instruments that flickered and failed in the storm. The facility was carved into the glacier itself, an organic structure that seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. Inside, the air reeked of chemicals and wet flesh. Alien caretakers guarded the nerve cores, their bodies fused to the walls with tendrils of crystal and sinew. The squad fought through them in brutal silence, blades and plasma fire tearing through the damp corridors. Every corner dripped with alien ichor. At the heart of the complex, they found the cores, vast sacs of living tissue suspended in web-like veins. They pulsed like monstrous hearts, their rhythms vibrating the floor. Elias set the charges himself, every second counting down toward their only chance, but the Dominion had anticipated the raid. The walls shuddered as reinforcements poured in. Dozens of armored soldiers surged through, war beasts at their side. Plasma bolts cut through the air. The humans fought back to back, holding the line, but the numbers were overwhelming. Harper, bleeding from a deep gash, caught Elias's arm. "Go!" she growled over the roar of combat. "Get them out." "I'll finish this." He shook his head. "No, we leave together." Her eyes were fierce, unyielding. "You're the one they follow. If you die here, hope dies with you. I can hold them long enough." Before he could stop her, she ripped the detonator from his belt and shoved him toward the exit. Then she turned, screaming defiance as she charged into the swarm, firing until the detonator's red light swallowed the chamber. The blast shook the glacier apart. From orbit, the Resolute's crew saw the moon split, a geyser of fire and ice ripping into the void. Dominion fleets around the dead star convulsed as their nerve cores were severed, ships spasming and crashing into each other like beasts with their spines cut. Elias returned to the ship with fewer soldiers than he had left with. Harper was gone. Her sacrifice burned into his memory like fire. He stood in the medbay afterward, hands trembling, staring at the blood of his people smeared across his armor. For the first time, despair nearly broke him. The Dominion capital seized the moment. The Queen appeared on every hacked transmission, her voice dripping venom. "You fight like insects. Every gain costs you lives. Every victory is a wound to your own flesh. You cannot endure forever. Your blood will drown you." Elias answered with a broadcast of his own, his face hollowed with grief, his voice raw. "You think blood is weakness? You don't understand us. Blood is the price we pay, and we'll pay it as many times as it takes." The galaxy listened. Where aliens saw death as defeat, humans wore it as proof of their strength. Each fallen soldier became a rallying cry. Harper's name spread across the resistance like a banner. On liberated worlds, fighters painted her initials on walls, on armor, on ships. But the toll was undeniable. The Resolute's corridors echoed with silence at night, bunks left empty, laughter gone. Elias carried the weight of every name in his log. He whispered them to himself before each battle, a ritual, a promise. Your sacrifice won't be forgotten. And though the Queen's laughter still echoed in transmissions, for the first time there was a crack beneath it, a faint note of unease. The humans, fragile and bleeding, were still standing. And every time they bled, they came back sharper. The Dominion had grown tired of ember wars. Skirmishes, sabotage, raids, they were beneath the Queen's dignity. To crush humanity once and for all, she summoned her full might to the shattered ring world of Orath. It had once been a jewel of alien architecture, a colossal ring encircling a dying sun. Now it was a graveyard, half collapsed, half drifting, its skeletal frame glinting in the void. Perfect for a decisive battle. The Queen's fleet blackened the sky. Thousands of living dreadnoughts drifted in disciplined formation, each the size of a city, their muscle fiber hulls bristling with plasma cannons and glowing crystal eyes. Chained to them were war beasts, titans bred in stellar forges, waiting to be unleashed. Elias knew it was a trap, but humanity had no choice. This was the moment everything pointed toward. He brought every ship left, 200 scarred vessels, engines whining, patched with stolen Dominion tissue and jury-rigged reactors. The Resolute led them, its hull pitted from 100 battles, its crew silent at their stations. On the bridge, Elias stared at the view of Orath's burning horizon. He could feel the weight of millions of eyes across the galaxy waiting. Resistance cells, enslaved worlds, even Dominion dissidents, all watching to see if humans could defy the impossible. He whispered, almost to himself, "Fragile bones, huh? Let's show them what fragile can do." The Dominion struck first. Plasma storms lit the void, boiling across the battlefield in tidal waves. Entire human squadrons vanished in fire. War beasts broke free of their chains, charging forward with jaws wide enough to swallow freighters whole. Elias gave no retreat. His fleet surged straight into the storm. Human ships moved like daggers, darting between the monstrous dreadnoughts, weaving through wreckage fields, using Orath's broken ring segments as cover. Every maneuver was reckless, every attack a knife fight against an enemy 10 times their size. The first human victory came from desperation. The Saber, its hull already cracked, slammed headlong into a Dominion cruiser, igniting its reactor in a flash of light that gutted 3 enemy ships. The crew went down cheering, their sacrifice shaking Dominion ranks. Across the battlefield, boarding pods launched. Marines poured into alien corridors that pulsed like veins, fighting room by room against enemies that melded with their ships. Explosions rippled through dreadnought innards as humans planted charges in nerve clusters, bringing the beasts down from within. Elias himself led a boarding strike. The Resolute locked grapples onto a Dominion command ship, dragging itself close despite tearing half its hull apart. He and his squad stormed across, plasma rifles blazing. The air inside reeked of sulfur and wet stone. Alien warriors shrieked as Elias carved through them, his voice raw from shouting orders, his blade arm shaking but unyielding. Outside, the battle raged without pause. Dominion fleets unleashed their full fury, but for every human ship destroyed, another seemed to rise, driven by rage and survival. Civilians piloted freighters converted into bombers. Engineers manned turrets themselves. Wounded refused to leave their stations, blood dripping on control panels as they fought on. The Queen's flagship entered the fray at last, a colossal leviathan, its hull a cathedral of crystal and flesh, its size dwarfing mountains. Its arrival sent shockwaves through both sides. The Dominion cheered, certain victory had arrived. Humanity only clenched tighter, for they knew what it meant. "Target her!" Elias ordered, his voice hoarse but resolute. "All ships, everything we have." The sky turned white. Every missile, every plasma burst, every hacked Dominion weapon fired at once. The Queen's ship weathered the storm, its shields glowing like a star. But cracks appeared, small fractures spreading across its crystal plates. The Queen roared in fury, her voice transmitted across every channel, booming like a storm. "Your defiance ends here!" Her Leviathan unleashed a barrage that shattered a dozen human ships in one blast. But even as the void filled with debris, survivors fought harder. Ships without weapons rammed. Fighters dove into the beast's cannons, detonating themselves to silence its guns. Elias and his squad fought their way deeper into the command ship, every corridor alive with resistance. Dominion warriors fell, shrieking in disbelief at humans who refused to yield even when bleeding out. Finally, Elias reached the throne chamber. The queen rose to meet him, towering and radiant, her claws dripping with energy. Behind them, the ship shook as battle tore at its heart. The throne chamber of the queen's Leviathan pulsed with a living rhythm, walls shifting and groaning as if the ship itself were alive. Plasma veins lit the hall in flashes of violet and gold. Elias stepped in, battered, bleeding, and broken, but unbowed. Every step he took echoed like a challenge through the alien flesh and crystal. The queen stood tall, her massive form gleaming under the pulsating light. Her claws were elongated, tipped with energy that burned the air, and her eyes, molten gold and furious, pierced Elias like blades. She had expected fear, submission, the shaking of a man who had survived countless battles only to fall here. Instead, she found defiance. "You," she hissed, voice like grinding metal. "Fragile man. I will crush you where you stand." Elias gritted his teeth, blood streaking down his face. Every muscle screamed, bones ached as if they would snap under his own weight, yet he stood firm. "Fragile?" he spat. "You don't know the meaning of the word." She lunged first, a blur of claws and crystal, energy flaring with each strike. Elias barely dodged, sidestepping and rolling, feeling the heat and vibration of every blow. The walls shuddered with the force of her attacks, fragments of crystal raining around him. He struck back where he could, swinging a reinforced steel beam scavenged from the ship's wreckage. Sparks flew as it collided with her armor, leaving deep gouges in the alien crystal. She hissed in surprise. No human had ever left a mark before. The fight became a deadly dance. She moved with inhuman speed, claws slashing, tail whipping, energy blazing in arcs that could sever steel. Elias relied on instinct, timing, and pure willpower. Every strike he blocked, every evasive roll, carried the weight of countless lives depending on him. His crew fought above, holding the flagship together as boarding parties struggled to keep enemy forces at bay. The queen's laughter rang out, a terrifying, resonant sound. "You are nothing. You are frail." Elias grinned through blood and sweat. "Frail? Watch closely." He seized a moment, summoning every ounce of strength left in his battered body. The ship shook violently, alarms blaring as the hull strained. With a guttural roar, Elias drove the steel beam under her legs and heaved. Pain lanced through his ribs, tendons screamed, but he lifted her entire weight for a heartbeat. Her claws scratching at him, her eyes wide in shock. For one moment, the predator became prey. He hurled her toward the reactor chamber, using her own momentum against her. Energy flares erupted as she slammed into containment fields. Cracks spiderwebbed through the living crystal. Sparks and plasma engulfed the chamber in blinding light. The queen's roar faded into screams as the life-sustaining heart of her ship began to collapse. Elias fell to his knees, chest heaving, bones screaming with exhaustion. Around him, the ship's walls groaned and shuddered violently. Outside, human ships pressed their advantage, tearing through weakened Dominion fleets, destroying war beasts with precision strikes guided by the chaos inside the flagship. Silence followed the storm. The queen's presence was gone, her throne chamber reduced to fractured crystal and scorched metal. Elias remained on his knees, trembling, listening to the distant echoes of explosions and the slow cheers of his crew over the comms. He whispered hoarsely, almost to himself, "Tell the galaxy. Humans aren't fragile." The impact of the victory rippled instantly. Across the void, enslaved species hesitated, then rose. Colonies once cowered under Dominion control ignited with revolt. Scattered fleets joined with Elias's remaining ships, inspired by the defiance of one man who had done the impossible. Elias's crew gathered around him, They were battered, bloodied, some missing limbs, yet they stood taller than any alien before them. He looked at their faces, each scar a testament to endurance, each wound a story of survival. The humans had survived the unthinkable and emerged victorious, not through raw strength alone, but through courage, ingenuity, and the refusal to break. The Dominion was shattered, their fleets crippled, their war beasts dead or fleeing, and the Queen, once an embodiment of invincibility, was defeated by a human whose body seemed fragile, but whose spirit could not be crushed. In the aftermath, Elias stood on the bridge of the Resolute watching the stars. Fires from ruined Dominion ships still lit the void, but now there was hope in the darkness. Humanity had faced annihilation, stared into the teeth of impossibility, and proven that determination could outweigh even the mightiest force in the galaxy. And somewhere deep in his chest, Elias felt the truth. No matter how fragile bones might seem, will, courage, and defiance could lift the universe itself. The galaxy would never forget the day a human lifted a living predator over his head and changed the fate of countless worlds. Humanity was no longer prey. Humanity was the storm.